Hi guys, I mentioned something about this earlier in the morning show, and I wanted to go into more detail of video cables that are often sold to the consumers for security cameras and the caveats of these inexpensive Siamese cables like these. First of all, this wire is not 75 ohms impedance. Okay, this isn't even close to 75 ohm impedance at all. Okay, this is much different. This is probably closer to 50 ohms. Okay, and well, you might say this that's fine. Let me explain one thing to you. When you're talking about analog video, there's a heck of a difference when you're dealing with this kind of wire versus the stuff that professionals use for professional installations. Now, I have a homemade cable assembly here, and this is much closer to what you'll find in a professional installation. It looks scary, it's chunky, it's heavy. However, this has much significantly lower signal loss. And to show you this, I have brought my DVR on my multimeter outside here, and we are going to measure it on the screen right now so you can see it. It's raining outside, so you obviously are hearing the sound of the rain in the background. And I came out here because, well, it's a nice chance to get out of the house for a little bit. Whenever you're testing with these probes, make sure to touch these two probes together and see if there's any internal resistance in the wire, and there is. It's 0.2 ohms. And you're going to be subtracting the 0.2 ohms from, this is 2/10 of an ohm off, so, or 2/100 of an ohm off, okay? So, yeah, it takes you 2/10 of an ohm, okay? So it's not exactly right to zero. So when you're measuring this cable, and I know it's exactly 15.25 meters because it says right on the package. We're going to measure it best we can at the two connector points on the cable. And I'll be honest, the BNC center connector is kind of hard to probe in because of the fact that it's kind of awkward, but we'll get any reading we can get is pretty close. If you measure the two braids outside the connectors here, you see a resistance of 0.23 ohms. So subtract the 0.2, so you get 2.1 ohms. And then you measure the inside conductors, and I'm going to measure it using the power connector because that one stays in easier and it's the same wire. And resistance of this is 0.32 or 3 ohms. Okay. Now, according to the board, and it says that at 1 volt peak to peak, this cable is losing half the voltage of 1 volt peak to peak signal, which means for composite video, your signal strength at best you're going to get is half a volt peak to peak, even in the brightest scene, which means it's going to be darker and lousier. So this is saying that this cable from one end to the other end is going to 50% voltage drop. Okay? That's crap. That's crap. This means that, and it comes with balance or adapters kit to these tape cables together, which means at 30.5 meters, they're going to have an effective signal of 0, which means, for you Americans, that would be about 100 feet. So if you connect this cable from one end of the house to the other end, and our houses have bends, you're going down walls, going around corners, whatever, that means that if you put 100 feet of this stuff in, you're not going to have any signal really coming to your TV or whatsoever. It's just going to be crap, crap, and more crap. In the commercial sector, the most common conductors is RG59. This is RG6. And I asked it for the average typical impedance for RG6 per foot, which is, or per meter, which is 0.006 ohms. So 1 meter of this is 6/100th of an ohm drop. That's quite a lot. So then when you calculate it up to 100 or 15.25 meters, this has a loss of impedance much, much lower. It comes out to be about 1 ohm impedance, about 1 ohm. So that's a lot of drop. Now, at the same time, the power connection at 12 volts DC on this cable, I notice I mentioned DC and not AC because you have to do with impedance, inductance, and all that. This is going to lose half a volt. This is the same wire, same conductor, and which means that at that cable length, a 12 volt power supply is going to be closer to 11.5 volts, which most CCTV cameras don't care about. That's fine. That's the video signal we really need to worry about, because if you're losing half of a volt over only 15.25 meters, you're basically getting barely anything. Please remember, this is unbalanced line. This is not balanced line. This is not differential signaling. If it was differential signaling, the loss would be much less, because you'd have the 2 twisted pair of conductors inside, which also would keep noise out. Well, it's not this. And yes, it's not this either. This is unbalanced line too. It is said the best way to avoid electrical interference from motors, generators, anything like that is to run the wire perpendicular. I'm going to use my probe here as an example of another cable. Let's say this is an electrical conduit. So it's fine to run an alternating current circuit perpendicular, i.e. this probe could be carrying mains voltage perpendicular to the cable, and it will limit the amount of inductance picking up in the video signal. But in reality, that doesn't always work that way. Now, today's modern cameras are direct current, and so for this reason, direct current does not cause an inductance. It's just a standard DC signal. There's no sinusoidal waveform. Okay? So when you made this homemade cable, we didn't have to worry about having the direct current 12 volts power going to the camera interfering the video signal, because the video signal was at the same thing, and so therefore it wouldn't be picking up interference. However, the composite video signal, be it be PAL or NTSC, I was using this with PAL, by the way, is going to give a cleaner signal, okay? Because the fact is, this is one much higher grade wire, has much higher shielding, and the only thing is, it's like trying to move a fire hose through your conduits. But this cable, even though it's semi-retired, is still usable to this day. I still use it. So when I put the new camera in, I had no choice because this wasn't long enough, and I needed to run this cable to go to the camera, and this wire was just too short. Don't let the length fool you. It's not 15.25 meters. This is a homemade assembly, so there's a lot of cheating. Okay. Very, very tough, stern stuff. Okay. So while this stove on Amazon and eBay, the Siamese cable is conveniently cheap, it's not good because it has signal loss, and it's going to cause your camera to look horrible. Plug your test monitor right into the camera, and the picture is as beautiful and as bright as day. But plug it into the end of this thing into your video monitor, and it's gonna look washed out. You know, it's just not gonna have the same quality of signal. Now, you can get active amplifiers if that's what you want to do, but this is going to add to the cost. So I would say, given the nature of this wire, it's not standard, proper, it's not even 75 ohm impedance. This is going to cut your signal. This has got a very, very high capacity, very, very bad capacitance, and it's just, seriously, just bin it. Get rid of it. This stuff is garbage for this. However, you might be saying this, but Michelle, would this be okay for music? No! Not at 15.25 meters of this. If you ran this cable to a preamp stage of a stereo amplifier from, say, a television, a tape recorder, or whatever, or a CD player, by the time the signal gets from that to your amplifier, your signal stage is going to be half as loud. It's going to take more amplification, and also it's going to pick up more noise in this cable. However, I have used the same cable for doing the same thing for sound, and found that the signal here was much more stable, much more solid, and sounded good. Okay, so this, for that purpose, was the bomb. This is the great stuff. But this, unfortunately, is cable TV grade. And what that means is this is copper-clad aluminum conductors. And unfortunately, an aluminum braid. You can't even solder this stuff. If you ever have to solder this wire, you're done. You're not going to be able to solder this wire. I can bet this is also copper-clad aluminum, but somebody had managed to muster to put on these plugs. But again, this is not going to work for your video whatsoever. This is just an embarrassment. So let's talk about what should you do. I'm talking about for a new installation, okay? So you want to install security cameras around your house, and you want to have your cameras work like a boss. I would say crimp-on BNC. This is a three-part BNC connector of this type is much better because, one, this, you can see the way it's crimped on. This is crimped on like no tomorrow. This is crimped on, a double crimp. I did it this way because I knew that these wires are going to get flexed and twisted and turned and moved around, and I was right in my choices. And so these here are the kind of cables you want to work with going to cameras. Now, what about the power line? For that, we're using standard lamp cord. This is a standard 16-2 2-core flex wire because it's carrying 12 volts DC, and it can carry a lot of current. Oh, we don't need the current. We just want the voltage and maybe about half an amp at most, maybe an amp. This wire, the current, unlike alternating current, does not have a skin effect, which means there's no skin effect, which means there's less likely that you're going to see a significant loss of signal. I personally, if I had to tell you which cable I love this stuff, but if you want to try to running this thing through walls and keeping the two wires together, you would have to do what I did. You have to lace it like this up because of the fact is that the wires will separate and get all twisty and snarly, and nobody wants to deal with that, including me. So that's the only thing. Now, why does this one have 2 BNC plugs instead of 1? And that's something I'm going to bring up because this cable, as I said, was custom made for me for a custom application. When I started the studio, one of the things I wanted to do was you have to maintain the impedance. And it turns out that the one device I have maintains is open-ended impedance on one side. It's not terminated. What that means is you connect this wire in to the camera, you're going to get an impedance of 150 ohms because the camera has a 75 ohm terminator, but the other end, which is plugged into the PAL to Firewire converter, or actually does USB to it, instead for PAL, doesn't have the termination turned on. So it's meant that you could actually feed this thing into a secondary monitor. You can plug it into another source. And so I said, well, if that's the case, why don't I connect a portable monitor to this circuit here, connect to the camera here. They both ran at 12 volts, so let's provide 12 volts to run both. This is the actual computer end, but okay, so when this is connected, the monitor is 75 ohm, the camera is 75 ohm. When it goes through on the other here, which is connected by a T connector, like this, that provides the 75 ohm impedance that the circuit needs. Keeps the picture strong and steady. Yes, however, look at the cost of the wire in the sense this is expensive. Now I happen to get a whole pile of cheap RG6. Cheap in the sense it was left over from prior cable television installations which were removed or discontinued or decommissioned. And so for that reason I had plenty of the wire RG6 cable laying around the house. And this cable here was used for almost 10 years. This cable here still looks good. It's solid, it's not going to break, and it works fine. This cable, however, you have 2 Achilles heels. Actually 3. 1, these connectors are crap. If you buy these cables, I've seen so many regular cheap RCA cables that are the same way. They're just cheap. The plugs, the wire break here and the plug. In fact, it's the same wires in an RCA cable you can get from your cheap electronics store or from a dollar store or a Poundland. This is not going to hold up. If you got to move this cable's going to move around, or if you try to shove it into an electrical box and your wires get pinched like this is going to break. And when it does, you got to replace not just the ends. These are not even standard sizes. They're not standard connectors, so you can go down to your local Allied Electronics or MCM or DigiKey and buy new plugins. They don't, you have to solder these wires in place. And that's going to increase more noise, and again, it's going to mess everything up. It's not a good thing. Not good at all. So what I would say is, now something you would say is, yeah, but the newest form is the balance. It's interesting we should talk about balance, because balance do what they call balanced line. it's like using twin lead for TV antennas. Balance and twin lead, 300 ohm twin lead on a television is balanced line. So in that case, those signals can go further because they're balanced. And so a properly routed and run cable will result in very little signal degradation. I can tell you another circuit that uses balanced line. Microphones. XLR microphones use balanced line. The reason is the same reason. It's because the two signals are out of phase. They cancel out any outside interference and keeps so that the main signal that's going into your amplifier is primarily from your microphone or other audio source. When the same would be true if you're using category 6 cable using a balun for video cameras. I don't like those baluns that much because you're going to carry power, right? You're talking about 26 AWG wire, which is just the same thickness as the wire that's in here. That wire is not going to carry a lot of current. You might say, well, Michelle, you don't have to carry a lot of current in a 12-volt camera. You only got to carry about, maybe a tenth of an amp, maybe even 20th of an amp at the most. Yes, but unfortunately, that means that the wire in here is going to get warm, even if it's subtly warm, causing the signal to, as the wire warms up, it's copper-clad aluminum, this is going to start to warm up. The voltage is going to start to see more resistance going from source to load, and it's going to cause you to see less and less voltage going to your camera. But because it's 12 volts, you're not going to lose. Half a volt loss isn't going to matter, usually, right? This is one of the reasons why American homes are wired with 120 and European homes are wired with 240, is because you realize there's going to be resistance, internal resistance of the cable causing voltage drop. So you want to have enough voltage so that if this was used for internal home wiring, heaven forbid, let's just say you hook this up to a 120 volt source, I would never suggest it, but just for this academic example, why not? If you hook this up to a source, let's say your input source is 120 volts. 120 volts means that at the end of this cable, 15.25 meters, you're going to lose half a volt. So you'll be at 119.5. That's not going to affect anything. Or in this case, if it's 12 volts even, and the output's going to be 11.5 volts, most cameras are not going to care. They're going to work fine. So the voltage is going to be fine for the input, but the video signal is the part that is what you're doing all this for in the first place. Losing half a volt on a cable that's 15.25 meters, and your voltage output of your video camera is 1 volt peak to peak, means that your camera's output stage is only going to be getting you half a volt at top, which means the color is going to be lacking. The color is going to be lack saturation. The color is going to just suffer. So I would say if you're going to get cables like this on eBay, and these are cheap as dirt, save your money. Save your money. Unless you're doing a really short run, maybe like a meter, 2 meters, don't go with that. If you really want to get a good signal from one end of the house to the other, you gotta go with RG6 or RG59. RG59 is kind of nicer because it's a little thinner, but RG6 is really the best stuff to use, even though it's a lot harder to move around. It will give you the best signal. And like I said, I laced this up myself, and I didn't do the best lace work on it, but it's still quite stable. This cable is still working after all these years, and it works fine. I can say this cable will probably last another 20 to 30 years, whereas you're lucky if this cable even lasts 5, because the quality is just not there at all. Maybe that's why there's no name on it. Because just like Savannah says, the quality must go in before the name goes on. There is no quality to this cable. It's trash. It's trash. Really. It's just garbage. Just bin it. It's really not worth it. Don't spend your money on cheap cables for video, because it's going to hurt you. Okay, I got a piece of that running right now because I got to get more of the good stuff. Now, commercially, they have what they call a Siamese cable, where it has 18 gauge wire for the DC and has, RG59 or RG6 connectors for the video. Better deal. This is really kind of what it looks like. It's just like this homemade cable. It would just have these two wires here for the video. You see red and black, and then the video cable. Okay? And it's in a non-metallic sheath. Get it. It's better. But I needed 3-wire, so that's why I put the 3rd wire in. Now, let me want to ask another valid question. Since that one converter doesn't have a termination on it, how do you fix that problem if you have no choice? Why? That's easy. Get a 75 ohm resistor, put it into a BNC plug like this, put it on the other end, and boom, you're all set. This is the way to go. This really is. And I know that so many people would say, that's expensive. RG6, good quality RG6 is not really more expensive. As far as the balance using RG, category 6, category 8 cable, category 8. Really? Okay, let's talk about that. Category 8 is shielded, individual shields for each pair. That means that you got the twisted pair effect, which gives it 100 ohms, 150 ohms, and then you have the shield in the outside, and then you have the 2 wires would connect to the balun like this, and then you would pass the signal through that, and then you have a matching balun on the other end. That's, I guess if you already got a lot of RG6, category 5, category 5E, 6 cable laying around in your shop, that'd be fine. But I find out when working with a lot of the cheaper category 5, 6E cables is that these things have notoriously contain copper-clad aluminum conductors, and they will just degrade. Though some of these cables, and this may be one of them, may be copper-clad steel. Now, it's still better than what the other stuff is, okay? But so you have to pick the best one that works for your needs. So, if you're installing the CCTV camera, now you might be saying, well, I'm going digital. Okay, SDI, AHD, CVI. Okay, what kind? Digital. You say, oh, it's all or nothing. Exactly, all or nothing. So you run 15.25 meters of that short piece of crap, you're going to get half a signal. Your circuit should still be able to decode it, right? Yes. Because as long as it can see the difference between the ones and the zeros, it can still decode it. In that case, that's where digital does kind of ruin it for good quality cable TV installations and coaxial cable installations of cameras. Because now you're saying is, I don't need to spend money and buy fancy RG59, and I can just use, RG. I can use RG shit, and connect to that, and I get a picture. Analog is more fussy, but analog cameras are also relatively inexpensive, so you can get more of them. I know analog HD is a thing. Analog HD, there's the word, AHD, is still sending an analog signal from the camera to your DVR or analog HD to HDMI converter. It's still sending analog. So which means, even though it's the ones and zeros, it may or may not be able to properly decode the signal below a certain threshold. So that's where, again, you need to be aware of the kind of cable you're using. If you look at a properly installed, well-done analog camera installation, you'll notice that the installer is using the better cables from the beginning to the end, because they know that it's going to matter, the signal is going to be good, the picture is going to be bright, and it's going to look nice. That's why if you look at the camera when we used to use the other PEL camera, you said the picture was brighter and it was more fun and I didn't have to tweak any settings. and the colors were good and vibrant. That's because the signal was pretty much suffered very little drop. And that's important. Because if the analog signal out of 15.25 meters of the RG6 is only going to drop maybe about maximum of an ohm resistance, maybe a little more than that, maybe about 1.5 ohms. That's going to be a big difference. It's going to give you the picture you want. It's going to give you the colors you want. And that's what you want. Now, there's also so-called SDI, HDSDI signal, which is, again, digital ones and zeros. This also, but it's strictly in digital from the beginning to end, but it's asynchronous, which means the camera is sending the signals ones and zeros over a connection that's at its own timing. It's controlling the timing. The camera has to have synchronization, start-stop pulses, but if the cable is too long and the synchronization and start-stop pulses are not there, you're not going to get nothing. It's not a matter you're going to get snow, you won't get nothing at all, because it depends on those ones and zeros need to be able to pick up by the incoming receiver. Okay, that's again is why I pick the cables I choose, because I know the cable is going to make or break your installation. You could buy the most beautiful pan and tilt and zoom camera on the market. You could spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a fancy camera and a fancy DVR system. But if the cables are crap, they're your weakest link, and they're going to be good. The picture has to have a good connection. A solid connection is going to make a difference between no picture and a picture that is fantastic. Nobody is going to disagree with me there. The same is true with the internet. I might as well talk about this real quick because this relates to this. It's been tested that even category 5E can handle 10 gigabits per second. Maybe even 20 gigabits per second if the cable is relatively short. But once you start getting long runs, your signal system is going to have to negotiate for a slower speed because there's no choice. Because you're going to be losing signals. Now, I'm sure, and I haven't measured the voltage on my RJ45s to determine this, that your typical analog signal, okay, is 10 base T. It says it's rated for 500 meters. So you're talking about a lot longer because it's sending a lot more voltage through a 5 volts differential signaling over the pairs to do the video. So that's going to make a difference. So you might say, like I said, ooh la la, $10 for 2 rolls of 15.25 meters, and then you see the plug, and then you say, gee, and I got this, I was really disappointed with this. I looked at this, I said, this is terrible. This is terrible. They made it sound like this was high-grade cable. This is basically bargain basement garbage. This might be good for working with headphones, or maybe I could use this to replace my headphones on my cord of my headphones. But that's another story. I wouldn't use this for my headphones either because I like a coiled cord. Okay, this isn't coiled. But these plugs are fragile. These will break off. These wires will break right here. And like I've already found, audio cables made out of the same garbage, they are almost impossible to fix. Some of these wires are tinsel, enamel-covered tinsel. And I'll tell you, if that's what's in here, that's why your picture sucks. Not only the voltage drop, which is real, but the fact is that they're using, as I said, these are not 75 ohm. I don't know why they call this 75 ohm cable. This is not 75 ohm at all. This is just trash. This is trash. Don't buy this. Okay? Save your money. Buy the good stuff. Like I said, if you do want to go with balance, you want to go with category 5Es, category 6 for video, yes, you can use that. Can you send the 12 volts DC and another set of pairs on the cable? Yes. In fact, it's standard category 6 cable, and actually category 5 and up, have at least 8 wires. So yes, you can have 2 pairs carrying power or video, and then you can have another pair carrying power, and you can have another pair returning audio back to your DVR. But, you know, guys, I really don't think you want to go that way. I tried it. It's... I don't know. It worked, but it was so subpar. So terrible. And I would say, don't waste your money. Don't waste your money. Now, on the other hand, I will say this much. If you need a DVM, this little $10 one I bought has been my go-to for everyday work. First of all, here's some nice tweets it has. If I want to know what the temperature in the room is, right now we're outside. It's 20 degrees Celsius right now. Okay? And in addition to that, we have a Type K thermocouple right here, which is this one here, that will measure temperature as well. And this is a very fast-acting thermocouple. And you can see the end here. This one, for example, I can put this in here in my probe, and this goes in here, and it goes in here. And I can now hold on to the probe in my hand, and you'll see the temperature quickly rises above, and it should get to about 37 degrees Celsius, because that is normal body temperature of the human body is about 37 degrees Celsius. But I might slow down a little bit as it compares a little farther, a little Type K thermocouple. But this will do the job fine for most people. This meter I bought cheap. This meter even came with batteries when I bought it. It has, it says it's a true RMS multimeter. This is a class 2. This is not class 3. Please be, this one says it is rated for class 3. Okay, so this one says class 3. I'm going to say with a side of caution, if this is class 3, because I'd still be careful with it, because I don't think it's really anything from China. I tend to wonder if they're really telling you the truth. But it definitely is. I don't even think it even has a fuse in here. And if it doesn't, and you use the 10 amp fitting on this guy, you're going to blow this meter sky high. Okay, that says here that the maximum resistance is 300 milliamps of 250 volts. So be careful with these. But it's for cheap at that price. This is pretty good. Also has a flashlight. I could turn that on. See, has a display light right there. You can see it. Okay. It has a flashlight right there. You can see that. You can see you have light. So like if you're working in the fuse board, you can see what you're doing. Of course, someone else might have to hold the meter to do it. But also this has, for alternating current, this has a non-contact voltage detection. Which means if you hook this up to alternating current mains power, just by waving it over the cable, it's going to tell you if there's AC voltage. That saved my bacon so many times when I thought a circuit was dead, and it literally saved my life at least once. My landlord thought he turned off the right breaker to the right water heater, and I happened to set to NCB, and I waved around the cable, and it was going beep, 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 beep. No, you turn off the wrong breaker. Which is exactly what it's supposed to do. So non-contact voltage detection is a godsend for electricians or any kind of hobbyist. This is a hobbyist size. They do make ones with more sophisticated scales, but I do wish this did have inductance. I do wish this had resistance. I mean capacitance, but this doesn't have that. The SAR meters that do, if you want to get one of these. This meter is really not that expensive. This is a godsend for electrical work, and it definitely suggests buying one. It'll help you in so many projects. So the 2 messages here is buy a decent meter, but also make sure to buy decent cables, especially if you're doing with baseband video, a composite baseband that only does 1 volt peak to peak. Likewise, if you're going to use the same wire for audio, and this wire really is only rated for audio, I would say don't expect at running a 15.25 meters from your audio source to your amplifier, it's going to be as loud as it would be if you plugged it right into the amplifier with a 1 meter cable. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And so make sure, if you can, buy the good stuff. When I say the good stuff, let's make sure what we're talking about. You want a wire that is going to be a bigger diameter, is going to be able to provide less resistance from one end to the other. And 3 ohms, it's nuts, okay? I mean, 3 ohms loss at 1 volt is a lot, okay? So keep that in mind. So definitely buy good wire and definitely buy good test equipment. Don't buy garbage. I know it's cheap and everybody says, oh, I want the cheap stuff because I have to save my money. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Okay, really, don't do it. All right, guys, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Stay out of trouble, okay? Bye-bye.